the Photoshop Basics for Scrapbooking class. Today we are going to be diving a little bit further into photo editing, piggybacking off of what we accomplished last week. Last week we talked about some of the very basic edits that we can make to photos, such as brightening, contrast, exposure, black and white. Today we're going to go into cropping, how to actually crop your photos, whether that is to a specific ratio, a specific height and length dimension, or if you need to resize your image, how to go about doing that. Now, while I'm going to show you both of those functions, we're also going to talk about the difference between cropping a photo and resizing a photo and when you might need to use those different functions. So let's go ahead over to my computer where we're going to look into cropping and resizing in both Photoshop Creative Cloud and Photoshop Elements.
All right, friends, here we are back inside of Photoshop Creative Cloud. And first, what we're going to work on is cropping a photo. So I've already pulled up a photo from one of my files. This is one that I just took on a day in the life documenting day of some toys in Jonah's room. So to crop the image inside of Creative Cloud, we're going to go over to our toolbar here on the left side of the screen, and we're going to click on the crop icon, which is basically two intersecting right angles. So we're going to click on that, and it's going to bring up this like brighter section, and everything else is more faded, where right now is where it's wanting to crop my photo. So when we have this open, the window here is changed, right? So we have our crop window open. And then up in the top, we also have a submenu that's going to let us make a bunch of different adjustments to how we are cropping our photo. First, there is the ratio. Now, ratios can come in really handy when you know the orientation or the ratio that you want your photo to be cropped into. For example, actually, let's go ahead and clear this. If I know I want my photo to be a 2:3 ratio, I'm trying to think if that is, yes, a 2:3, or in other words, this is the same as basically, let's call it a 6:4, right? So that's going to give us a 6:4 ratio photo, which is essentially a 6:4 photo. You can also, which is another way to say 6:4 or a 4:6 is a 2:3 ratio. So inside of this submenu here, you can click on ratio and then you can input your own ratio numbers, whatever that is you want. Or you can go further down to where it says original ratio, and that's going to keep everything to scale based on the size of your photo as it was. So if I adjust this, the scale of my photo is going to stay the same. So the distance between the sides and the top, if that makes sense. Then you could do a 1:1, and this is going to give you a square crop. I will oftentimes use the 1:1 ratio when I'm trying to create photos that are specifically designed for Instagram, because Instagram has square-shaped photos. So you can do a square shape ratio. You can do an 8:10, which is also 4:5. There is a 5:7. There is a 2:3, which is the same as a 4:6, and a 16:9. So those are essentially the ratios that you're going to see inside of the crop menu here. Now, if you know that you don't necessarily want your photo to be cropped to a ratio, but you have an exact measurement of what you want your photo cropped to, then you can actually go to this width height resolution. This is primarily how I crop my photos because I like to be very specific about the sizes that my photos are being cropped to. For example, if I want to turn this photo into a 6:4 photo, I can type in 6 as my width and then 4 as my height, and I always crop everything to 300 pixels per inch. Then I can adjust this window where I want it to go and hit the enter button in order to crop my photo into the 6x4. If I want to create a photo that's going to live outside of a page protector in a 6x8 photo, for me, I crop mine down to 6.875 inches. So in between your numbers, you're going to put a space and then IN for inch by 8.25 space IN for inch, 300 pixels per inch. Now I can click and drag my square to the spot where I want it to be. Let's say I'm going to put it right like here, and then hit the enter button in order to crop my photo. So now this is exactly sized to that 6.875 by 8.25 measurement. Perfect, right? Okay, so let's clear this. Now, something else that you may occasionally need to do is to crop your photo down to a specific pixel size. A good example of this is when I am creating a thumbnail image that's going to be used for one of my YouTube videos. I have the exact pixel size that I need that photo to be cropped to. In this case, I'm going to go back to the I keep wanting to say weight, friends. We're going to go back to the width, height, resolution for the style or the type of crop I want to make. Then, and I just hit the clear button in order to clear out all of those fields. In the first one, I'm going to type in my first pixel size. I know that my photo needs to be 1280 pixels, 1280 pixels wide. So instead of saying space IN for inch, we're going to say space PX for pixel. And this is going to be with a height of 720 pixels. And again at 300 pixels per inch. So this right here is the size of my YouTube thumbnail. When I hit the enter button, we are now cropped to that size that I would need. So in this width, height, resolution submenu, you are able to crop your photos using either an inch measurement or a pixel measurement, which is really super helpful and allows you to create all different kinds of crops. When I am working in a page where I've got a bunch of tiny little photos, I also crop inside of Photoshop using the width, height, resolution. Let's take this photo, for example, and let's say I want this photo to be 1 inch wide by 1.5 inches tall at 300 pixels per inch. Again, I always use the 300 pixels per inch. Okay, so we can adjust this where we want it to go, hit the enter button, and now this photo is 1 inch by 1.5 inches. So if I were to click on the zoom tool and then right click here and say print size, it's actually going to reduce that down to the size that it would be if and when it was printed. This is my favorite way to print out those itty bitty tiny photos. Again, making sure I'm cropping at 300 pixels per inch because it's going to give me the very best resolution, making my photos as clear as possible when I am actually printing them. All right, so let's close out of that for a moment. Actually, you know what? I lied. Let's open that back up. Okay, so we have this photo here, and we've talked about cropping photos. Now, there may also be a time when you need to resize your photo to a different size. Perhaps you are writing a blog post and you need your photo to be a maximum number of pixels wide, but it does not matter how, or there is not a limit on how tall your photo can or should be. Another example of this might be if you are ever on a design team and they ask you to submit photos for their websites. They may give you an exact pixel dimension to have you crop your photos to. If they give you an exact width and height, then I would suggest cropping your photo and using the width, height, resolution. in order to crop your photo down. If they are only giving you the width measurement though, and the height doesn't actually matter, then you may actually want to resize your photo instead of cropping it so you can keep the entire photo intact. To do this, you're going to go up to Image and Image Size. You can also use the short keys Alt, Control, and the letter I in order to open up this menu. In here, you're going to see the original size showing, which right now is 4,032 pixels wide by 3,024 pixels tall, and my resolution is currently set to 72. Most of my photos, when I import them into or open them inside of Photoshop, start with a resolution of 72 pixels per inch. Most often, creators, blog posts, pictures that you're printing, I'm trying to think of anything else. Most often, the resolution on those photos is changed to 300 pixels per inch. So we're going to start by changing the resolution first, because when we change the resolution, it's going to change the pixel size up at the top, no matter what. So always start with the resolution. There may occasionally be some teams or some websites that require you to have 200 pixels per inch, and you can also adjust that here as well to 200 instead of 300, but most often it is 300 pixels per inch. So now when I increase this to 300 pixels per inch, we're now at 16,800 by 12,600. Now let's say I'm going to submit this photo to my Allie Edwards for the design team. Or let's say I want to put this photo on my own blog/website. The maximum width that I generally work with, or the maximum width that is asked of me for photos that I am submitting, is 2644, so 2,644 pixels. It will automatically, because there's this little chain link right here, it will automatically adjust your height for you so that it stays to scale when you hit OK. So I've got this 2644 by 1983, 300 pixels per inch, and I'm going to hit OK. Now it's going to compress this and reduce the size of it just slightly, but you'll notice that the photo is not in any way cropped. It is exactly the way that it was to begin with. So this is called resizing an image versus cropping an image. Cropping an image is going to take your exact dimensions, and it's going to force you to get rid of sections of your photo depending on where you are cropping to. Whereas resizing an image is going to let you change the size of the entire file without having to crop any pieces out of it. I hope I'm making sense here. So that is how this works inside of Photoshop Creative Cloud. Next, let's turn our attention over to Photoshop Elements. I have the exact same photo open inside of Elements currently. Let's begin with cropping the photo. The crop tool here is down in the Modify tools on the toolbar at the left-hand side of the screen. It has the same exact icon. Instead of having a submenu that's opening up at the top, this time your submenu is going to be down at the bottom. And you'll see that there is this drop-down menu here that lets you select a lot of those same things. So we can use the photo ratio, which is the ratio the photo is taken at. You can select a specific ratio, which in this case they're giving you inches instead of pixels, right? So 16 by 9 inches, 2.5 by 2 inches, 3 by 5, 4 by 6, so on and so on and so on. Or you can use no restriction, which is generally what I do. When you click on no restriction, actually let me go to one of these real quick. So a 3 by 5 is automatically going to put in the 5 inches by 3 inches here, and then it's going to give you some different crop suggestions that you can use if you want, but you can actually pick your own by, again, clicking and dragging the screen to where you want it to go. Now, if I click on no restriction, it's going to leave my width and height blank. This gives me the option to do the exact same thing as Creative Cloud. I can put in an inch dimension or I can put in a pixel dimension. So let's say I want this one to be that 6.875 inches by 8.25 inches. Now, the last section here that is blank is your resolution. This is where we're going to put that 300 pixels per inch. Now that we have this, we're going to start by clicking on one of these crop suggestions. Generally, when I'm cropping in here, just as a quick reference, I will pick one that goes all the way from the top to the bottom because I can always adjust it. Yes, I can always adjust it to where I want it to go. So then once I have this where I like it, I can leave it on the screen and I'm going to hit this check mark and it's going to go ahead and crop this down. So now this is sized at that 6.875 by 8.25. In the same way, we can do the same thing with pixels. So I can do that 1280 pixels by 720 pixels. It's going to give me some suggestions. Let's move this down and we're going to hit the check mark in order to crop that down to that pixeled size. Okay? So you can do pixels, you can do inches, whichever the measurement is that you need. But I always leave my resolution at 300 pixels per inch. Okay, last thing to show you here is the same with the resizing of the image. For this, you're going to go up to image and then resize and then image size. Now the short keys to get to this menu are the same as they are for Photoshop Creative Cloud. It is Alt, Control, or Alt, Command, and I. Now let's open that up and we're going to get a very similar menu here. So we have pixel dimension and we have document size. So the first thing I want to do is go down to the resolution and we're going to change it to 300 because as soon as we type in the 300, it changes everything else. You know what, actually let me go back and just show you this. So let's leave it at 72 and let's say that I want to change my pixel width to that 2644 that would be required of me for Ali Edwards, right? Then I'm going to go down to the resolution and change that to 300. Well, now I'm at 11,017 by 8,263. So always start with the resolution first. So 300 pixels per inch. Then you can adjust this either based on the inches or on the pixels, which is kind of nice that you have both option menus here. This one I'm going to do that 2644. It's going to automatically adjust the height to the 1983. The cool thing is it's also showing me what that means in terms of inches. Not that that totally matters, but it is kind of a cool feature there. And then you can hit OK, and it does the same thing. It compresses it, it reduces the size, and now this image is sized correctly. One of the major reasons why resizing images is something you may be asked to do or something that you might need to do is because based on the server where a website is being hosted, they can only handle so much data. So by reducing down the sizes of the photos, you're going to make the data reading or the uploading and all of that for the website that much easier. So a lot of times that is why image resizing is often a requirement for putting photos into a blog or something of that nature. All right, friends, well, that is our lesson for today. So for homework, what I would like for you to do this week is to open up a photo inside of Photoshop or Photoshop Elements, and I would like you to do 3 different crops. First, I would like you to do, actually let's do 4 different crops. First, I would like you to take that photo and to crop it according to a ratio. Maybe you do a 1:1 ratio so that it is a square photo for Photoshop, or maybe you do a 2:3, which would be either it would basically be your 6:4 photo. So do a ratio crop. Then I want you to do a no, what is it called? No, or I guess a custom or a no restriction edit. For this one, or crop, for this one, I want you to use inches, and I would love for you to crop your photo to 2 inches wide by 3 inches tall. Yes. And then do another crop with the same, in the same way, so with the width, height, resolution. For this one, I want you to do the pixels of 1280 pixels by 720 pixels at 300 pixels per inch resolution. And then the last thing I would like you to do is to resize your image so that the resolution is 300 pixels per inch and your width, your maximum width, is 2,644 pixels. I will include some of this in the lesson write-up. So if you need to reference that for the different sizes, feel free to do so. I feel that if you give all 4 of those crops and resizes a chance, if you get used to them a little bit in that way, that it's going to help things make a whole lot more sense to you as we move into the next bits and pieces of Photoshop and working with photos. All right, so these 2 lessons, this one and last week's, were the very basics of photo editing. Next week, we're going to start diving into some of the more advanced photo edits. And specifically next week, we're working inside of the camera raw filter. So super excited to share more about that with you next week. Until then, have a great rest of your day, friends, and I'll catch you in next week's video. Bye now.